And Vince, this is now an official live broadcast on the internets. It's now something that can never ever be taken back because the internets are eternal.
As we all know, yes, a permanent record for all time, or at least for the next, 2 days until everybody forgets about it. Yeah, but pretty much permanent.
Yeah, that's probably a better point, actually.
Yeah.
The internet lifespan is, after all, approximately. I'm going to give it 6 days. I'm going to be generous, I think.
Right, unless you do something really stupid and the internet can like magically bring it up so it ends up on like like at midnight or something, years later.
Yeah, or you want to be on Tosh.0 and
Yeah, there you go.
like that.
Yes. Somehow I doubt anything that probably happens during a paintisode is ever going to meet that bar. That's what I would say.
Yeah, it would have to be. Pretty wacky.
Tell you, hour 4 of this paintisode, it really takes off.
Oh my goodness. So here's a bit of painting news.
Yes.
I have in my hand right here a Citadel paintbrush of their new range.
Oh, very good. I was looking for somebody to give some reviews on that. So what did you pick up? Which one?
Well, I have the layer sized,
Okay.
as well as the shade size. So comparatively, I would say the layer one appears to be a size 1.
Okay.
And I would dare say the shade one appears to be a size 4 if I'm comparing it to Winsor Newton standards. So I'll give you a little bit of a backdrop there.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Interesting. All right, so you have like medium. I'm gonna actually go to their page and look at these. All right, you have medium layer and medium shade. You said, is that what it is?
Maybe that's what that M means on there. Yeah, probably.
Look at me.
There is
cracking the code.
Yeah, you're right. There's an M on this thing. That must be what that means.
All right.
So I'm actually only about a half hour into use with this thing.
So it might be a bit early for a full
First
judgment. Is that what I'm hearing here?
Yeah, this is its very first action right here. Well, at first glance, I would say when I was toying with it in the shop and checking it out, I could say that I think it's promising for its snapback quality. So that's good. And it's performing okay with that. Paint flow and paint load on this little one anyway is better than average. But again, I'm always going to compare it to the Winsor Newton Series 7s, and it doesn't quite have paint flow and retention like those ones do of the same size. But passable. I would give it a more than 50% grade.
All right. Well, it's not too bad, and the prices, seem actually fairly reasonable. The looking at it. So I went and looked them up. The medium layer brush, it says pure sable, so I'm going to assume that's red sable as opposed to like Kolinsky sable, which would make sense. That's about the right price range for that. Maybe a little cheaper. And the medium shade is a synthetic sable mix, which again, like when we brought it up on Warhammer Weekly, I thought it was really interesting because I don't really know of anybody else doing mixed hair brushes, like mixes between synthetics and actual sable hair. Now there might be some out there, so I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying I don't know of anybody doing it.
Yeah, so at a glance, this one, I mean, it appears the same kind of color tone as the regular sable one does. So oddly that it advertises it's synthetic mixed in there. I guess if you look really closely and you kind of pinch it out so it fans a bit, you can see that there are a couple of heavier bristles in there.
Gotcha. Yeah, it doesn't say like what the mix is, right, or anything like that. So I who knows? So
I'd imagine that they just have put in a small percentage of those things, probably to keep its snapback quality on a longer exposed stem, as my guess. And it certainly does that, I guess.
Absolutely.
Certainly
No, that's
does.
interesting. I like obviously the Artificer one, which is their big expensive brush, right? That's like the $20 one.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one they're making to, like, you know, compete with like the high end market, as it were.
Yeah. And I toyed with that one in the shop. I didn't pull the trigger on it because it didn't appear to be a standout. It didn't feel like a standout.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling on that is this: like, if I'm going to spend $20 on a brush, then
Mhm.
I'm like that's a lot of money. I better be getting something amazing. Like $6-7, fine. You know, I'll try other brushes at like $6 or $7 just to get a feel for them and stuff like that. That's okay. But I mean, I just picked up 2 Winsor Newton brushes for like $12 a piece, you know, which is what you can get them for. And those are full Kolinsky, you know, like the high end Series 7s ones.
That's a good value on those.
It is. Absolutely. So I'm certainly not going to pay that much for, so like at that point, that means it literally has to be better than, you know, a Winsor Newton, right? And like, so that's a pretty high bar. I picked up a couple. The reason I got a couple new ones because I have my Winsor Newtons. I haven't aren't in need of replacement, but I got a couple new ones because I found out that Winsor Newton actually has this miniature range, which is still Kolinsky Sable, which is still a Series 7. It's just a shorter bristle brush specifically designed for miniature painting.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, they actually have 2 lines now in the Series 7.
Mm-hmm.
One is like the full range watercolor brushes, and the other is a shorter brush for miniature painting, which I thought was awesome because I am personally very much a fan of the shorter brush. I do not like long bristles. There's the downside of less paint in the belly of the bristles, but there's the upside of a lot more control.
Yeah, I've often advised other folks when they're painting that just to bear in mind that for most of the time when you're doing fine detail work, you're only using the end 20% of your brush bristle anyway. So the length of that bristle doesn't necessarily matter a whole lot because you're only using the very tip.
Yep. Yeah.
Kind of
the
monster truck ideal, right? It will sell you the whole seat.
Yes.
You don't need the edge.
But you only need the edge. Yeah, absolutely. I like it.
But the advantage is that it does hold more brush, or more paint rather, so you're not dipping back in as much.
Right. I'm not generally too opposed to that, anyways. I work with like a really low amount of paint. I try to have a controlled amount of paint. You know,
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't mind going in, and then I'm always wiping and adjusting and using my thumb and stuff like that. So no big deal.
Right. Okay.
Nice. Speaking of monster trucks, I have a segue for that.
Oh, do you really?
I do, really.
Okay.
So here's my segue for monster trucks. So, well, I'll start. Before I start, I'll ask. So, what did you think of the chrome Sky Earth non-metallic metal skull cannon with the warp lightning cannon on top that I had finished up there last week?
Oh, I don't know. I looked away every time it came on the screen.
Fair enough.
No, I joke. That's not entirely true. I spent a couple minutes examining that on a still shot, and I don't know. I guess in principle it appeared to do what it should. It made me afraid actually to go in and try my own, which I have not yet, because again it looks far more difficult to master when you start to consider not just reflection off the ground, which was the initial thing, but reflection of all other things to do it truly justice.
Yes. Yeah.
When I started to think about that, that made it a little bit more daunting.
It is daunting is a great word. It is pretty that. But the reason I asked that is not because I'm fishing for praise or something like that. That's not what I'm doing. I wanted to say that there's another model that is very similar it's based off the same kit that I've been trying to think of how to do. So that is, I want to have a blood throne for my all corn girl army. I don't really care how good it is. That's not what I'm, whatever. Models are models. If I have an army, I'd like to have all the models in that army, regardless of their individual quality.
Oh, you don't have to convince me of gameplay quality for the sake of painting a model. You go ahead.
Yes.
I'm not the guy that cares about that in any way.
Right on. Good man. Good man. So I've been trying to figure out what I want to do about my blood throne. And then I went to see Mad Max. Okay, on Friday night.
Okay.
Have you seen the new Mad Max yet?
No, I have not.
All right. Well, I would recommend it if you like. Well, based on this piece, do you like the older Mad Max movies?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm certainly interested in the film. I'll get to it sometime.
Okay. Well, in Mad Max, this is very much a sequel or a philosophical sequel to the second movie. Okay, which was the Road Warrior, right? And with all the cars and the just walk away, that guy. And so there's a car in there that's in sort of the bad guy's fleet armada. I'll keep this spoiler free, everyone, I promise, by the way. But there is a car in that fleet that is like 20 feet, this 20-foot tall, ramshackle, put together mess of cars and steel. And on the back of it is a bunch of drummers, just like guys drumming, okay, at like this angle. And so it's a triangle, like the car, picture a big giant vehicle of some kind. And then there's a big triangle like this on the top of it, okay? Back here on this angle are all the guys on steps like drumming, okay? And this front wall, this flat side facing forward toward the car, is just a big wall of speakers, okay? And hanging in front of that wall is like a guy on, if you've ever seen like Peter Pan in a high school stage play or whatever, they're on those little, like they're in that harness to like fly around. He's on like a harness and he's got a double-necked electric guitar that he's sitting there jamming on, that when he like pulls on the little whammy bar or whatever, flames shoot out of the end of the guitar. So
wow, that's tremendous.
It's pretty epic. So I woke up Saturday morning on a few hours sleep because I had been up to like 5 painting. And I woke up about like 8 or 9 in the morning with a shot, and I pictured in my head exactly what my blood throne needed to be.
Yeah,
it needed to be a tribute to this monstrosity. And so I have like an extra cauldron, or I have most of a cauldron of blood, and I have a bunch of extra pieces from a second skull cannon. And so all of this is getting cobbled together with like, I ordered some drummers because I didn't have drummers, but all of this is going to get cobbled together into the massive blood throne of Khorne, just like drumming dudes. And I'm not sure if I can find a good guy playing a guitar yet. That's my only issue.
Like with a guitar out in front, there's got to be something, and I can think of old 40K orcs that are like that.
Yeah, the old 40K noise marines is what came to my mind, right? Because they used to have the sound noise marines or whatever that played guitar.
Yeah, and if you want fully armored guys to go into the Warriors of Chaos Army, that's probably most appropriate. But I'm sure there's probably some fledgling company that did some 80s hairband rocker miniatures at some point in the past.
The 80s hairband minis. Oh, where is that?
That's got to exist. I'm sure there was enough of a fanboy that decided that I want Lemmy immortalized forever in 1 inch tall fashion.
Yes. So that's my current project. I'm actually cleaning up all the pieces for it right here to get ready to start working on it.
I dig it. That's a good ambitious thing. Does it look prettier than the actual Canon? I mean, how could it not?
Well,
I guess
it'll be mostly Cauldron of Blood, right? So it's just going to be like big Cauldron of Blood with lots of big Cauldron of Blood with lots of Skull Cannon added on. The issue I've got with this is that I don't exactly know what I want it to look like. And it's like this cauldron is full of all sorts of weird, intricate pieces that make me want to not put the, like, you know, you really want to not put this whole thing together before you paint it, right?
Yeah.
But with any kind of conversion like this, where I'm just literally taking, I mean, I am just banging this out from scratch because I don't even know right now what this final thing is going to look like, and I certainly don't know how to put together this insane Cauldron of Blood, just because that kit is ridiculous.
Yeah, I've never had the pleasure myself. I don't know how that goes.
But
I'm sure
so it should be a fun challenge.
Yeah.
What about you? What are you working on?
Well, I'm finally getting into the fair but foul segment of this month's activities. So I got my little demon chick out here. Yeah, let's see if we can. She's there in the darkness, but
Very nice.
Whatever. Yeah, I've just done the flesh tone so far, which is very much a classic Oriental Oni kind of a skin tone. I think that's what I'm aiming for there. So it's a red that highlights to a little bit of creamy red, rather than going into the orange or yellow tones.
Are you mixing up like a pale flesh into that to get that color change?
Actually, I'm mixing in a very light brown into some red.
Nice. I like that.
So that's how that's come together. Yeah, because flesh tone I think would still go a little pink. So I wanted to stay away from going to pink.
Gotcha.
So it's a very it'll end up being a very subtle difference anyway between that. It'll still look creamy without looking pinky, I guess. That's highlight. And now I'm moving on to the skirts.
The devil is usually in the details.
This is the one that I wanted to try a small bit of sky earth on.
Okay.
So she's got some cups, of course, so she doesn't show nipple. And those can certainly be metal. And then she's got around her skirt, she's got an array of knives that are just hanging from tool belts, essentially. And then she has one left arm that's a claw arm.
Okay.
And in the other arm, she's carrying a halberd. So it's not a great big mass in any one place of metal, but several different positions of it so that I can switch angles and play around with that reflectiveness.
Gotcha.
But it's not a commitment to one big large area that needs to morph from reflective to non-reflective and then worry what's reflecting off of that and reflecting back, etc. So I think it'll be easier to tackle initially, or at least that's my hope. And then if that feels good, what I'm really going to do the sky earth on is this Menoth model that I have for, I don't know how I acquired this, but I have a Gribbly Menoth fella from the War Machine range.
Okay.
And aside from some skirts on the lower level, he is entirely metal in every other way. So I'm going to have to try, what I wanted to try to do with this one is I want to do a combo of chrome and traditional non-metal silver or iron, and then also have some non-metal gold on this. So I'm going to try to exhibit all three on this one.
I like it.
and we'll see how that blends together. I noticed you did that a little bit on your own, didn't you? Did you do the skull cannon with some? Oh no, you did it with actual metallics, didn't you?
Both. I had, so the
The gold?
pistons are just traditional like steel non-metallic metal in the back. It's a small thing, but it's, you know, it's there.
Yeah.
And then the gold is all just true metallic metal gold.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought you said on there. Funny you didn't go with that doing the non-metallic style, because I have found in the past that gold is in fact easier to do than steel.
It is. I think that's absolutely true. However, the problem is it's in the end not actually reflective, right? No matter how polished you make non-metallic metal, it is not actually reflective. I mean, quite obviously, you're faking reflection, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be like, I wanted it to be absolutely just like the gold to be just like really, really, really bright, because the chrome is supposed to be so bright, right? I mean, chrome is so polished that it's perfectly reflecting everything around it, right? And so I like non-metallic metal gold has a softer look to it, even when it's like really super highlighted. So I wanted the really bright polished gold. So I actually took the highlight of the gold up into like a very heavy steel mix to get like and I used the same sort of techniques and steps and stuff on that.
Okay.
And like, you know, I did the highlighting in the same method, if that makes sense, right? Because I wanted the illusion that this thing is like hyper reflective and shiny to be carried throughout. So that was the reason for the choice.
Gotcha. Okay.
I feel like non-metallic metal steel, the advantage to it is it really can look like metal, because steel can be like kind of grimy and dirty and not very reflective. Like, you know, steel is really only reflective when you're looking like, when it's sort of directly catching the light. Other than that, it really is just gray. But gold is always somewhat reflective. It's gold. It is sort of, you know, naturally brighter.
Yeah, when I think about all the ranges of metal, you're very right. Like we can have some pig iron, you know, that's just pounded out pig iron, which could be very, very common for our world. Even absolutely black, non-reflective cast iron or wrought iron works that way too. It just ends up being black unless it's fresh off the forge.
Exactly. Yeah, steel has such a variance to it, right? There's no one color, but gold is gold. I mean, that's the whole point of gold. That is what it is, right? It is immutable, as it were. It is just gold. Unless you start alloying it with like other things to make electrum, it's gold is gold.
So as I don't recall if you guys touched on this at the end of it, but from this experiment, does it encourage you to go out and try something different? Like did you learn from one another so that you would try and explore something different next time you do it?
Yes. I mean, here's what I'll say. I don't like Paul's technique was absolutely top notch. Like, and if I was inclined to do like an armored guy in non-metallic metal steel, I would do exactly what he did, because he did it just perfectly. I mean, brilliantly. There would be no reason to do it. Like, that's how you should do it. There it was very instructive to me, and I think I learned more doing this in this challenge than I have in any other challenge previously, simply because and I did talk about this during the show, you know, doing non-metallic metal, it's unforgiving, right? That's really what it boils down to. It is a completely unforgiving thing to do. And as a result of that, it will teach you how there are fundamentals you must get right to make it look correct. And the trick is you can take those fundamentals and go back into your true metallic metals, and they will look 10 times better, even when you're working with regular metallics, right? Because you can start using those same techniques of contrast and the light catching and stuff like that to to really just take it to the next level, even with true metals. And
Yeah.
in that original article that I linked there on the thing, that's actually what she's talking about. Like the miniature painter in question, who's very award winning and awesome, is like, look, I don't have anything against non-metallic metals. They're fine if that's what you want to do, but I like true metallics better. But that doesn't mean you get to be lazy, right? And that's her whole point. Is like we need to think about true metallics in the same way we think about non-metallics, and be willing to put in the effort on them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an absolute fantastic point.
Yeah, and I think that I do get lazy with regular metallics because I have those in the arsenal. That I don't do that. I know that I should, and I've only done it a few times where I do that selective highlighting and pointed shading in a metallic thing, rather than just paint it some medium silver and then get my shiniest silver and scrape it along the edge. Right. Sometimes I just fall into that simple way.
Because it's easy to do, right? You're like, yep, there you go. Maybe you throw a wash on there, right? You put in some black wash or some brown wash to give the metal some depth and color, and then you just whatever, maybe you put a little bit of the color back on, or silver edge something. Yeah.
Yeah, I find I only maybe go so far as to do some with the highest highlight. I'll do some streaking on the metal, like to show that it's been recently cutting into something, so that it's freshly shiny because it's just been used,
Yep.
with no tarnish. But yeah, I'm pretty lazy about that, full admitted.
It's something I've been trying to work on a lot more with my recent Bretonian knights. So like I take the knights way up on the edges and do a lot of mixes on the steel. So even though they're true metallic metals, I don't just go metal wash, metal edge or something like that. I go, steps in between, highlighting, blending, all that kind of stuff. Try to do unified light catches and, all that kind of thing.
Well, what we're getting into talking about here is the struggle that I think a lot of hobbyists who've been at it for a long time always have, or at least I think they do. And that is sometimes the correct color for a model is the color of done. Right?
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. Yeah, it's a luxury with the Bretonians to take that time, right? Because the reality is, when I started that army, I said I'm going to paint every knight as though he's an individual character, and if I ever don't feel like doing that, then I am not painting that knight anymore, and I will come back to him, right? And that was the commitment I made to myself, and I have stuck to that. So like they're each one gets his own love. There's no batch painting. There's no rushing. It's you do it as though he's a character. And I've been very happy with everything that's happened so far with that army.
Yeah,
that's almost done.
I think the visual look has really benefited from that, and that you've been able to stick with it. Maybe if we go and look at the path of a hobbyist, certainly impossible to do that if that's your first ever army. Because eventually you would like to play Warhammer. And you should play with painted models. So putting that off for 8 months while you painstakingly spend 10 to 12 hours on each model, probably not something to encourage a guy to do.
Very fair. No, they need more what our current challenge is this week. The speed painting challenge. Or this 2 weeks, whatever. Yes. I added speed painting, and which Paul was like, before we started the show, he was like, I don't want that. That's terrible. And I was like, it's on there. It's my week to choose. He was like, fine. And so I just added it before the show because it's, whoever's hosting, we basically have them replace the one we did from last week. They pick. And I rolled out of 10 choices. That was the one that came up. I died laughing. So we gave ourselves an hour to paint one fig and 2 hours to paint another fig, and we got to see what can we finish the model in that time. Which, I mean, for Malorian, that's a joke. That's 2 hours. What are you doing? Taking some extra time. He's the king of the speed paint.
Yeah. Yeah, you should. So what's the subject for that, or does it even matter?
Doesn't even matter. There was
subject
it was
model.
more. There was a bunch of restrictions, like has to be at least 3 colors. You can't prime and do the whole thing with airbrush, like to get and then like count that as not painting. No airbrush at all. It has to be complete brush work. Priming has to be out of a spray can. You're allowed no more than 2 colors of primer on the model out of the rattle can. Let's see.
Well, because you're worried that Paul was just going to zenith highlight some things, and
Yeah, if you just like zenith highlighting the whole thing and then just literally run like a glaze over it. Yeah. No rocks. Has to be at least a human-sized model, right? So you can't do like do a base and call that a model. Like we tried to root out all we were trying to root out all the ways we might think to cleverly cheat.
But I think you should. I think you should do one model in the honest way and then find one in a cheaty way.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, the challenge is only like 3 hours, right, total for this. Like that skull cannon probably took me, I don't know, 30 hours of work. I'd say it's pretty reasonable. Mm-hmm. And Joan of Arc probably took, I don't know, probably 12 or 13. So, so 3 is a joke comparatively, right? That means I did like a work week for the last episode. So 3 hours, that's vacation.
Well, that should earn you an extra day of vacation. Extra time put in.
Well, that's kind of what the speed painting challenge is. This is taking a vacation. The trick is just what model. Fortunately, I'm like slowly trying to. I've got a buddy who has an Empire army that's just like a bunch of old things and out of date. It's stuff he inherited from me way back in the day, but he's really into the Empire now. And he's also not in a position where he really wants to like invest in an army, but he wants to play with everything. Like he wants to have Hurricanums and War Altars and Demigryphs and crap. And I'm tired of him just randomly farting around and proxying for any model he can lay his hands on in my collection. Because I'm tired of staring across the table at like 6 armies. Like at one point in time, he was using like some of my Bretonnians. He was using like a Skaven Screaming Bell and some Chaos Plague Flies, and just on and on and on, right? To make an Empire army, and I was like, all right, that's it. I am going to assemble an army for you, but I don't really want to spend any money because it's not like I'm sitting here, Mr. Moneybags. So I've been slowly over time trying to like find super cheap deals or beat up models that people are just trying to get rid of. You know what I mean? And then I'll spend the time to just fix them up, of assembling stuff, or like getting bits auctions. Bits auctions are awesome. Like I got Demigryphs for $8 because of bits.
Nice.
I didn't get the knights. Who cares? I got plenty of old knights sitting around. Just need the birds. It's the bird that's the hard part.
Yeah.
So that's been my most recent project. So I might pick some of those Empire dudes because I don't care about how they're painted. If I make them look like crap, who cares? It's not really my army anyways.
Yeah. Last year, I was having this discussion with a guy locally about the merits of GW washes and also including like secret weapon washes and other things like that. We're talking about those, how it's made such a wonderful next step in painting evolution and making it so much easier. So anyway, where we got to with that conversation was, wonder if you could paint a whole model with just washes.
Yes, you can.
And so I did. And so I did. I painted an Empire Wizard with only washes after the primer. Sure. And,
it takes a while though. Like that's not a speed paint thing because you've got to do lots of layers.
Yeah, you know what? He did still spend a couple hours. I did still spend a couple hours on him, but probably not more than 2, actually.
Yeah, you just don't have to worry about the precision, right? You can be a little more forgiving because you're letting the wash do a lot of the work. In a recent White Dwarf, there was an article on that. There was one of their house painters, one of like the heavy metal house painters, wrote an article about how he's been experimenting with a wash only style, and he used all the Citadel washes to paint like actually a fairly complex mini. And if you like search on YouTube, there's a couple really nice instructional videos where people follow his technique and show you like what they managed to accomplish. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think they're a wonderful tool, really. They're so good. Comparatively to the inks. Did you ever experience the inks that Citadel did?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Still have one or two of them around, of course, because some things just last forever, right?
Oh yeah, it's hard to go through all those. As do I, and I like them, but for a different purpose. It's not for a general washing purpose. I use it more for, I guess, what people use the new glazes for these days.
Sure.
Sometimes I end up thickening them up with a little bit of medium, but they do much better at glazing coverage than washing.
I am a big fan of the glazes more than I am of the shades. Not to say I don't love the shades. I do. I love them. And I use them enough. They definitely have a lot of purposes. They are a great tool in the toolbox. My only issue with them is that they're not, whatever they have in them is not the normal stuff. Like, I don't know what is in them. Like, what's the chemical composition of them? Mm-hmm. But it is not, it is not the same. Because you could make something like that shape, right? By just taking a color and thinning it down with medium and such like that. Maybe put a little flow aid in it, whatever you need. Like, you could get that to happen. But if you run that over a model and just let it dry, you will not get the same result as you do out of that Citadel shape. Like, there is something different about the chemical composition. And it has to do with, like, the chalkiness, or, like, I is what I would call it, or the texture of what's left behind.
I wonder if it's a wax medium in some ways, because I've noticed at times if I go on too heavy with a wash, then it ends up leaving a bit of a waxy residue, and it's almost sort of like a cloudy layer on it.
Yep. Yeah, and like that's, yes, exactly. When you use those shades, you notice it if you even run them at all over like a large flat surface, right? If you try to put them over, as opposed to what they're really used, should be used for, which is really like cracks and crevices and stuff like that, or just something like that, something small. But if you run them over like a large flat surface, what you get is like a multi-hued kind of spotty texture, right? Unless you really, really, really like wipe and wipe and wipe and wipe and wipe and do your best to smooth. And even then you can still see it if you like zoom in, take a picture with your phone and zoom in type of thing.
Yeah, I think it's something that a guy always has to be a little bit watchful for, overdoing that stuff.
And I'm very persnickety about that kind of crap. How do these fit together? Stairs. Seems like this would be an obvious step.
But not so.
But not so. I don't know. There's probably something to it. I have the only problem with buying your things in bits as opposed to buying the whole model. No instructions.
Ooh, that hurts. Because you know what? In some of these models that they're making these days, I would be absolutely lost without it.
Yeah, like on my little Terrorgeist here, which I got him all for bits. There's my little screamy Terrorgeist. So it turns out that on his back legs, which I know there's no way you're going to be able to see this, but on his back legs here under this bone where his leg joint connects, turns out there's a piece that's supposed to run down his spine here, okay, that you have to glue on first and then put the leg on top of. Well, guess who didn't do that piece first? Because I had no instructions and I was just winging it. So that's not there, but whatever. I mean, in the end, you don't really notice what's not there unless you're, like, he still looks fine. He's not missing anything majorly functional. It was a little like, it was just some little dangly bits off his spine, but whatever.
Does his leg look disjointed though and distended from the rest of it though?
No, because it wasn't like a connection piece. It literally just like it sits under it against the spine, and it's like little tattered. It's like a little tattered flesh thing hanging down.
Oh, okay.
I don't think
I did a 3-man last year, and without instructions for that 3-man model, no hope. Would have been no bloody hope in hell for me if I didn't have that.
Oh, no way.
Separate bits for the joints, and you use these joints for that guy and these joints for that guy, right? Like if you're going to make Durthu, you have specific joints for him. It's all over the place. I
Yeah,
mean, you
because
can,
if you
match up
use
the
one,
stylistic things of the tree and the branches. You can match those up stylistically to know which ones belong to one another. There's no way to tell with those joint pieces at all.
yeah, because they're just little round clumps of plastic, and like
Yeah.
this one is a right arm joint that makes the arm go like this and hold it down, and this one is the right arm joint that only works on the right arm joint, but will make it go like this if you want him holding a staff. And if you put this one on and you want him to hold the staff, well, now you're screwed because he can't, unless you want the staff shooting off at some weird akimbo angle where he literally looks like he's trying to stab himself with it or something, you know. That being said, I did mix mine and I flipped back and forth in the instructions. Like my tree man has like a different face, but he's using Durthu's sword, and just like I just ended up flipping back and forth in the pages and combining it how I wanted.
Okay, I have some advice to ask you right here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm about to launch into the Sky to Earth segment of doing this model.
Okay.
My impression is that I am going to effectively paint the whole surface that's going to be metallic in my brown tones, you know, my darkest brown tone. But then here's my question for you. From the horizon line, did you start light and work your way north, or did you start from the top and work your way down to the horizon line when you're doing the blue and white tones?
Okay, here's my advice. Opposite. Do the opposite of what you just said. Like, paint the whole thing, paint all your plates white.
Okay.
Okay. And then if you've got like a micron pen, okay, especially in like a, have you got a micron pen?
Yeah,
Okay,
not of
fine.
those colors. No, not of that color. I don't.
Well, do you have a black micron pen?
Yeah.
Well, that'd work.
Oh yeah.
Because you're going to
To
paint over
draw
it.
my horizon.
Exactly.
You mean
Draw your
my-
horizon line. Yep, exactly, with the micron pen. What I ended up doing, like with the skull cannon, to make a hard horizon line. Now I used the airbrush, so like that made it easier. But because you can take white over dark brown with an airbrush and not have to do layers, right? At least not in the same way. You can do layers a lot faster. But I made myself a. There we go. I made myself horizon templates. You see those?
Oh really? So you blew through those?
Yes, and you can see where they're even like
I
framed on the edge.
I don't have a big enough surface to work that with, though.
Right. Yeah, you got to do the paint. So that's what I was saying, though. I think for that case, but I still did like I would do the brown, make the wavy, choppy edge line, right? Because you wanted to have like some ridge to it. Just not flat. And then take like a dark brown. You want like the horizon line itself should be the darkest thing. This was my horizon line color, which is Game Air Charred Brown. This is like a German camo black brown in the model color, or I wouldn't have a Citadel conversion. I don't know.
Well, no, I got colors in mind. That's
okay.
The colors is not the hard.
Cool. But yeah, darkest brown there, whatever that happens to be, and just paint over that micron line with a pretty accurate brush. Then your sky is already white, right? Which is what you want right at the horizon line. And then what I did is just layered up blue gray from there. Right. Okay. Well, and then went back and forth and retraced the horizon line in white, and then did more layers of blue. I mean, there's like 60 layers of paint on that skull cannon going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But you get the idea.
Okay.
So that's my advice.
I think I do. I'm going to go there.
Because that white has to be like so crisp at the horizon to fake the effect. And I don't know, and it also, like, not only does it have to be so crisp and almost like pure white, but it has to be completely accurate. Like, you need as hard of an edge line as you can get, right? Because the horizon isn't fuzzy. Like, it's exactly hitting that line where the light is. And so the problem is the only way you're going to get to white over a brown is by just layering, and you're almost by necessity on a small space like that, you're going to have differentiation in the tone, right? And you're going to like accidentally dip one time or something. So your cleanup would just take forever. So that's why I would say do it white. Whereas with the brown, you can run like a dark brown over white once, and pretty much that's it for that white, right?
Yep, I agree. Okay. That makes good sense to me. I'm going in.
All right. I'm excited.
Where are you? This is what I want.
How are the Dark Elves not all dead? I don't get it. They should all be dead. Because...
The way that they spell out their society? Yeah.
Well, possibly, yes. But no, everything they have is so sharp. I just got to imagine it'd be like living in a world made of X-Acto knives. They just must be cutting themselves constantly. How do they not just exsanguinate?
I don't know. I just, out of the Warhammer mythos and storyline, the Dark Elves are the ones that I associate with the very absolutely least, by a long shot. Right from day one, when I started to encounter Warhammer, and friends of mine had Dark Elf armies, I borrowed an army book and had a little bit of a read, and I'm like, this is nonsense. There's no way that this society can exist for more than 3 weeks.
Nice. Yeah.
All their murdering, etc.
Yeah, it's funny because like they're all about murder and all this stuff, right? But I mean, the key is they have some kind of system of insular laws where they all heed something amongst themselves. They have some kind of system of honor. They don't just openly kill each other. Did you ever play Dungeons and Dragons at all?
I did, yeah.
Okay. Did you ever play any Planescape or play in the Outer Planes?
No.
All right, well, get ready because I'm about to.
Pretty vanilla stuff. Pretty vanilla stuff, really.
Well, this is about to get a little nerdy. Okay, in the Outer Planes, which are sort of the cosmos of the D&D universe, the base assumption, the planes are based on alignment. Okay, and it's called the Great Wheel, and at the top and bottom are good and evil, and at the picture a big compass. So north and south is good and evil. East and west is law and chaos. Okay? And the planes that exist at those points in the compass are aligned to the morality of that place. That's the Great Wheel. So at the true north point is like the most heavenly of holy good places, right? It's just pure good. It cares not about law or chaos. It is just complete beneficence, as it were, right? Okay. The opposite to that is a plane called Gehenna, the Gray Waste. And in the Gray Waste, the idea of it is that it's pure evil, okay? So like no law, no chaos, just pure evil. And I always found their take on that to be shockingly insightful. What makes Gehenna pure evil? It's not like people are running around acting evil or like the chaos, like that everybody thinks of the chaos in Warhammer as being just sort of like pure evil, right? But it's really not like the chaos forces. The pure evil of Gehenna is that no one forms social bonds. Literally the secret to the place is this: there's no trust. That's it. That's all it takes.
Everybody's an individual, yeah.
Everybody is a complete individual and everybody is evil. Okay? So hence, everyone knows that everyone else is evil and no social bonds can form. So there's no community. It's not a place of like rampaging murder and fire and death. No, it's empty. It's the wastes. It's literally just a bunch of people huddled alone because the second two of them get together, they're both going to try to murder each other or hurt each other or injure each other, right?
Yeah.
There is literally no trust. And I always found that to be so very insightful and brilliant because effectively it's the complete absence of society that generates evil. And I thought that was a very neat insight by the designers of Planescape. So to bring this back to what we were talking about, the Dark Elves always rode a little close to that line for me, right? Because they have this society based on not trusting anybody and murder and stuff like that. And it's a little bit like, really? Why? How? You know, like there's some kind of logical breakdown there. You know, that like Gehenna readily admits and speaks to, but the Dark Elves seem to kind of ignore, and somehow they all get along, even though they know they're all 8 seconds away from murdering each other.
Well, yeah, the only thing that sort of keeps the society together, as far as the way they write it, is the fear of their overlords, and in most cases, that's Malekith.
Right.
That's the only thing that keeps them from going into this selfless murder instead of planned murder, which is something that they do instead.
Right.
They just have murder festival.
Murder, yes, murder fest. Have you made your way through the rest of Archeon yet, or are you still going? You still going through?
We're going, yeah.
Okay. I reread the last chapter today. I'm kind of I actually skipped ahead. I reread the last chapter just because I wanted to read it again, and I'm not going to spoil anything from it. Obviously, I don't want to ruin anything for you. And then I'm going to reread chapter 2 again before we get together to talk about that on Thursday. Also, I watched. I hesitate to say this because you might not notice it, but I'm going to say it because if you did notice it, it's bothering you maybe. I watched the Thankful one, and I just wanted to apologize for saying as much as I did in that. Oh my god, like in chapters 4 and 5 of Thankful, I said so much. I wanted to reach through the screen and punch myself. I did it more in chapter 4, so I am really sorry. I will try to speak with a clearer diction from this point forward. That was infuriating.
Several episodes ago, because I don't necessarily rewatch the entire thing.
Right.
But for the sake of editing, I do scan through and pick up some things. And I was certainly very guilty of that throughout the Nagash business, and still am when I'm not conscious of it. But the difference is I'm trying to be more conscious of it now. So it still happens, absolutely. But I think it happens less because I have it on my mind.
Yes, I'm going to try to keep it on my mind for sure. Yeah, part of the problem is we're taking these big, giant, you're taking like 4 pages of text, right? And you're trying to condense it down to like 2 sentences. And it's hard, as I'm formulating that thought, I'm trying to like say, okay, how do I break this down, right? And that causes the pauses while I think.
Yeah, and I think also when I think back on the Nagash ones, we're a little better organized or a little bit better in the way that we do our delivery and passing it off between each other than we were before as well. Because the way that I came across in the past was, you don't know that I'm going to be done talking about something in the next 10 seconds, but be prepared to take over in the next 10 seconds.
Right.
Right. Like that's kind of the challenge of doing that kind of organization. But I think that we've spent enough time with each other that we pick up on each other's tells now and understand a little bit better about when that 10 seconds is coming. And that's just from familiarity for more than anything. But any suggestions on how to handle that otherwise?
I am going to try to make a conscious effort. I agree with you. I think we've been doing better. I just need to, I think it's a self-improvement step I need to take at this point, because we've been much better about splitting up the way we sort of talk it through and things such as that. Oh, see, there I go again. I mean, I always do it. I know I'm an ummer, so I have to watch myself. I don't tend to just shoot off at the mouth. I like to have some idea of what I'm saying, and so hence that causes reflective pausing.
Yeah. Another very real noticeable thing, and I probably have one too that you would be able to identify, but anytime you need a moment to think about what you're going to say, Vince, absolutely. That's the go-to.
Yes. Absolutely.
There's nothing
that is
that overall.
There's a nice, well-known thing that I saw a television special on it of why in conversation people often reply with those affirmatives or repeat the last thing that was said back to them and stuff like that. And yes, it seems to be a sort of universal thing that's our brain needs extra time to sort of consciously form those thoughts, and so we all do that to some degree. Although in rewatching it again, it was funny too, because I knew when I had my argument all prepped and was ready to like launch into a diatribe at the beginning of that one, when Keith started, beginning of chapter 5, when Keith was recounting the status of like the lizardmen against the Skaven, and I just like I was raring to go on that one after he trotted out that spin job.
Yeah. Well, so I must have something that I pause on when it's being thrown to me, but you'd probably be better at identifying that than I would in listening back. What'd you notice?
I did not notice too bad. Most of the time, you were ready to go and to pick it up. You had many less ums and sort of pauses than me. So full credit to you. You were definitely the strength there. I was the detractor. And all I could think was, man, Kieran must hate me for how many times I said in this. I was like, if I was me, I would punch me. So I wanted to bring it up just in case you had noticed and were like, man, I wish he would stop doing that. I will try to stop doing that.
Well, without revealing too much to the people in YouTube land that are going to watch it later, that's certainly just a reflection of familiarity with the subject as it's being turned over, but more so for people who watch it, it's more so of picking up where the other guy left off, and that's always a struggle and a challenge from the perspective of, as I said a few minutes ago, you don't often know when the guy's going to be done talking about a particular subject to be able to take it over.
Right. You're trying to listen to them, reflect and speak intelligently about what they said, while also thinking about what you're going to talk about and the cogent points you want to make and how that's going to connect and what's happening in your section of the story and so on and so forth.
I think what's helped that, honestly, and Keith does it as much as any of us do, and maybe more, is as he senses that we're moving on into a different subject area, if there's something that he wants to make a point of, he'll interrupt and say, well, before we move on to that, here's something that I noted.
Yes.
And it's okay to do that, I think, and we've become all better at doing that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Hey, there, I did it. I need more of those guys. I love this this is such a cool little thing. I used it because I had 2 of them, but I want to get more of them. It's the, like, on the front of the cauldron, this weird little, like, statue thing that's holding up the actual cauldron, this little guy.
Yeah.
Mannequin thing. That's such a cool little, like, piece. It's really neat kit.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said you see many uses for him, do you?
Yeah, absolutely. He's like a guy stepping on top of a bladey thing who's like ready to hold something in that sort of Atlas pose, right? That's great. All sorts of uses for that.
I'm sure that's in his resume. Exactly what you just said. That's in his resume.
Yes. I am good at holding stuff up like Atlas. If that's what you're looking for, I'm your guy.
Line me up. So I spent the early part of the evening, as I was finishing up a couple things and getting my paint table all prepped to go tonight, I listened to Mitch and Nick's reply to the soft scores discussion.
Yes. I haven't got to listen to yours yet. I know you put one up as well, right?
Well, only just a few hours ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's certainly the hot topic or the touchy topic always keeps coming up, and I talked about it a little bit as well, was the idea of scoring points for an army you didn't beat. And that's a big deal. And I don't I'm not quite sensitive enough to understand why a person who does not paint their own models even has an argument towards I should get points for that. I don't get that thought at all.
So you're saying basically 0 points would be the correct amount.
That's right. I am saying that.
That is definitely a hard edge take on it. Yeah, it's an interest. It's.
I'll spoil some arguments that I had in my video, I guess.
Go ahead. I need to formulate some thoughts.
To paraphrase, I would say this: if I go to a tournament with you, let's say,
Yes.
and I trust that you are a far better general than I am, I sign up in my name, but I sit quietly and eat my cheesy puffs while you make all the decisions in the Warhammer game. You roll all the dice and you push all the models around. Do I deserve the best general award if you do super good?
Well, clearly not.
Right. It's preposterous, right?
That's preposterous, of course. Yes.
Okay. Equally, if I get, I don't know, pick a name of some celebrity that's absolutely alluring, and I bring her along, and she does all the talking for me, and she charms you to death across the table, while I push all the models around, and don't say a word to you for the whole time. Do I deserve the best sportsman award?
If you bring Allison Brie to a game, I will give you best sportsman. I don't care whether or not that's legitimate or not. You may absolutely, like, you get full marks for that. That being said, it would seem the answer should be no, correct?
Right.
Of course.
Okay. So then equally, if I show up at an event and stand beside a group of models that was painstakingly, with many dozens of hours, the work put into that by some other human that is not me, and I sit there proudly and claim credit for it, am I not equally wrong? I want your answer to be yes, but give me a counter attack if you wish.
Sure. Okay. Well, let me try to play some devil's advocate here for a moment.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, here is my devil's advocate that I suspect people would probably launch. The bar is, in generalship, is how good of a general you are. The bar in painting is how good your army looks. It does not matter who did it. The expectation is not that I painted my army. The expectation is that the army is painted, because good, well-painted armies are more fun to play against. They make the hobby more attractive, and they are simply the unfortunate necessity of the way that this hobby is. So it is, the cost of business is that we have to paint our armies. And the tournament is incentivized to make the armies painted because it makes the experience better for everybody. Like, we don't like to sit across from gray plastic. It can also make it harder to play against, just skill-wise, when things aren't differentiated and, don't look right and stuff like that. Like, it's hard to even recognize maybe what the unit is to some degree, or who the characters are. And so you actually could lose tactical decisions because things aren't painted. So we agree things need to be painted, but nowhere in there is the idea that I would have to paint it. That's not what's being judged. It's just the paint on the models. Whereas with the player skill, that is why I am there. I came to the tournament because it is a test of my skill. And sportsmanship is literally a reflection of me as a person. That's what sportsmanship is meant to test. It is meant to test how nice and how professionally or cordially, or whatever you want to say, I conduct myself while engaging in the business of performing that strategy. Okay.
Well, there's one thing that makes me sad about a phrase that you used there. And forgive me if I get the exact words wrong, but you said that painting your models is an unfortunate necessity.
Mm-hmm. To be clear, I'm playing devil's advocate, folks.
I know. But for the people that believe that it's an unfortunate necessity, I think even Nicholas had said that, if you're not into this for the sake of some aspect of the hobby, then why are you into Warhammer? Because there's a whole lot better strategy games out there in the world. I'm willing to admit, and people complain about it all the time on the internet, that there's way tighter rule sets. There's greater depth of story in other games as well, if you want to play some role play games. I mean, you can't be doing Warhammer just because it's the greatest test of strategic skill. Can't be. So there's got to be some level of involvement in those other two pillars of the Warhammer hobby, which is the painting and the sportsmanship, the community end of it. It's got to be. So if we can agree that you're not just there because Warhammer is the greatest test of strategic skill in generalship, you got to have some sort of desire to have cool painted models in your possession. But where I really want to go with that thought is, you can still participate in the tournament with an army that you didn't paint. There's no rules against that, and I don't think I've ever been to an event that has turned somebody away from participating in the event because they didn't paint their army. But the consequence is, you shouldn't get an award for that, and you shouldn't get a nod towards your best overall for that either. So in most events, and the events that I run is what I'm using as a primary example, is that we have an award for the best general. Okay, so that's your strategic measure. You're full on for that, right? You're a great player. You go ahead. You win it. We have one for the painting and we have one for the sportsmanship. And then we combine those three totals for the best overall. But you gotta, when it comes to the painting part of it, you can't be called the best overall if you have 0 points for your painting because you didn't put any effort into that. So you still qualify to get 2 of those 4.
Sure.
And until you embrace the hobby side of it and paint your models, then you can't claim the best painted army.
In the end, I honestly would completely agree with you. I like to step away from devil's advocate. Okay. I do completely agree with you. Like if you are having someone else paint your army, then what you now qualify for is best general and best sportsman, right? Like that, and that is completely legitimate and fair. If you win battle points, you win battle points. But overall should be overall. The very name of the thing implies what it is. I think that, to me, we as a community need to respect the fact that this is part of the hobby, that it's not an unfortunate necessity. Now, there's a time cost to this, I understand. And, you know, I get it. Real life is a thing. And that's fine. No one's saying you shouldn't have other people paint your armies. Absolutely not. I love that there are commission painters out there. I have commission painted for other people before. You know, I like getting paid for that. I don't mind doing the work.
Yeah.
So the issue is not, yes, you can still play in tournaments. Yes, you can still win best general. You can still, absolutely, and you can still do all those things. You just don't get best overall because you're not the best overall. It seems a facetious argument almost to be making. Like, I want to win best overall because I want to. Well, you're not, though. You didn't do that. You didn't do that thing, right?
Right. Like two-thirds of participation. It's hard to imagine that you can be the best when you're only taking part in 2/3 of it.
Yes.
Now, certainly.
Although, let me say, would you ban them from best overall or just give them a 0? And here's what I mean. Let's assume they get a 0 for painting, and painting accounts for some portion of whatever their points are, right? But because of how everything else works out, it actually happens that they just crush it on battle points, right? They 20-0 all 5 opponents, and yet somehow miraculously are also the best sportsmen. Because as they're kicking people's teeth down their throats, they are super friendly about it. And everybody just loves them. Like you can't help but love getting beat in the face by the guy, right? Or girl.
And I was just going to make that point, actually. And that is that ultimately when soft scores relate to the best overall, it depends on what the tournament organizer chooses to allocate as a percentage to each of those aspects. I mean, very commonly we have a 50, 25, 25 kind of spread. So already we're telling you, because it's a tournament day, that the way that you play the game and the way that you smash figures off the table is more important than those other two anyway. Okay?
Right.
So before you get all upset that I'm not going to give you points for not painting your army, let's recognize that you're getting twice as many points probably for your performance on the battlefield than you are for the 100+ hours that you didn't spend painting your army anyway.
Right.
Okay. So if it's that kind of spread, you're right. It could be that you score maximum 50% on that, and you get maximum on the other aspect as well for your sportsmanship. So you score 75 points, and that happens to be enough to beat all the rest of the field. Nobody else scored more than 75 points. That could very well be.
And I assume in that case, you would have no issue with them taking best general. It's more just like the handicap is in the place. If you can overcome it, that's, hey, more power to you.
Yes, I do say that. So you score 0 points for the painting aspect towards the best overall, but certainly that's the only handicap. You're not disqualified from it. No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I like that. That seems more than reasonable. I could totally support that.
And you might even appear at an event that weighs battle points even more than that. It might be 70% of the tournament score going towards that, and only 30% in the other two. Well, then it doesn't matter so much.
Yep.
Go out there and kill things.
Yes, I think I say this obviously being a biased person who loves painting, but I think that we do need to embrace the idea that this hobby is about that the best overall. If we're gonna make up titles like that, right, and really talk about things like masters and being the best and all this sort of stuff, you need, like, I think of the episode of Thundercats where Lion-O took control of the Thundercats. Did you ever watch Thundercats?
No, that's lost on me.
Okay. Well, are you familiar with the Thundercats? Do you know what who they are?
Vaguely, yes.
All right. They're a bunch of cats, and they're all fighty. But, like, one is really fast, and one is really strong, and one is, like, very stealthy and all this stuff, right? Whatever. And Lion-O is the leader. Okay. So there's an episode where Lion-O has to prove himself worthy of being the sort of leader of the Thundercats. Okay? Yep. And to do that, he has to beat all the other Thundercats in what they are the best at. Okay. You understand what I mean? Yeah, so he has to outrace Chitara, and he has to outfight and outstealth and outcunning and all this stuff, all the ones who that's their thing. He has to literally prove not only is he worthy of being the leader, but he is the best. He can beat all of them at their own game. That is what it takes for him to justify his position as the leader of the Thundercats. Mm-hmm. He doesn't get to sit there and go, well, you're the one who's, you're special because you're fast, right? No, he has to be as fast.
So if we were to take that analogy over to Warhammer, if you were to really be deemed the best overall, it would be so rare because you have to be the best at all three. There can be no other individual better than you at any one of those three. Sort of like winning the Triple Crown in horse racing, right?
Yeah, a Triple Crown winner is pretty rare because that horse is amazing, right? It went back to back to back, 3 races, and beat the field every time.
Well, I think that it's the one thing I didn't touch on was the relationship with the Masters and how that qualifies you for the Masters. Because from what I've understood of the other guys talking about it is that it's the best overall scores that get you to the Masters, but yet the Masters doesn't really measure best overall in the same way. So it's a little bit incongruous in a way, I think. How what gets you there is not what's measured when you get there in the same way. Do I understand that right?
Well, I believe this is all my secondhand understanding. So please, if somebody is watching and whatever, and I speak wrongly, I do apologize. I have no hope of going to Masters this year or anything. That's not something on my plate. So I don't, I'm not like super dialed into it. But my understanding is the regions get to set their own rules for how they pick the people they send to Masters, right? Because every region gets 8 regions, 10 people each. Is that right? Every region gets 10 people. Yeah. So they get to set the rules. So if region A says best overall is what feeds in, then that's how they pick their 10 people, right? Or whatever. I mean, often I think most regions, what they end up doing is using, like, if you win X number of GTs, and when they say win, they generally mean best overall, right? So yes, by virtue of that, it does actually end up absorbing that. Whereas Masters is really just pretty much a battle competition. I think if I had my will of wills, I would want to see Masters take into account everything and be very serious about the whole hobby. Because I think we should, and this really gets to the heart of what of my feelings on this. I believe that we should value the fact that these models have to be painted and assembled and converted by us, and that we also have to be better players and show a lot of skill and all these things. I think all those things are really important, because why would we not want to set a high bar for ourselves for the title of master? That which is too easily earned is too lightly esteemed, right? As Thomas Paine said. I am not insinuating that being on the Masters is easy to achieve, but I'm saying that, like, such a high bar, if you achieve it, then you really do, you have earned that title. You are the U.S. Master, because you have proven that in all dimensions you have conquered the field. And again, maybe it's not the best of the best, but you are at least great. To be the gold medal winner in a decathlon, you don't have to win all 10 events, right? Almost no gold medal winner in the decathlon actually wins all 10 events, right? They are very near the top in all 10 events.
Yeah, agreed. I think that what they have to decide then is, in the Masters, or whatever they want to call it, if it's not the Master in the definition that you put forward, is the Master the best Warhammer player, or is it the best overall?
Right.
And therefore, if you're qualifying for the Masters that only cares about whether you're the best Warhammer player, then really all they should be doing is measuring the best generalship to get you there anyway.
Right.
That would be my counter argument to all that Masters comparison talk.
Absolutely. If that's really what we mean Masters to be, right? If it really is meant to be sort of an examination of pure skill, like what we're concerned about here is battle, not, painting and stuff is for other things. What we really, we're here for the fighting. Okay, that's cool, no issue. Then it should be fed in by best generalship.
Yeah, and that's where it differs, I think, from what I understand about the ETC. I mean, you don't qualify for that. I mean, you get selected to go to those kinds of things. But there's no measure of sportsmanship or painting as far as the end result of the tournament, of the team tournament. I think they do give out individual awards for best painted models and armies. And there's a risk of you losing battle points if you're not a good sportsmanship, I think. But in itself, it's really just about how you score on the table. Now, does the general populace of Warhammer want to participate in an event like that? I don't think so. And that's why we do perpetuate all these events that have a measure of all three and prop up in the predominant number of events the best overall as an ideal of a combination of the three. And that's why it's revered. And that's why people want that. They want to be the best overall, because it really is a much bigger prize than the other three individual ones. It's a much more coveted prize. So they're back to my point earlier that I think the error of the qualifying for the Masters is adding up the scores of your best overall guys, if really what the end goal is to be the best Warhammer player, and none of the two of those other three factors don't really matter to that.
Right.
I think that's the mistake that people, and so therefore, guys like Anthony who do want to qualify for the Masters, that's why this comes up as a point of contention. If he's being measured on his best overall results, but he can't get best overall because he doesn't paint his own armies, and this is what I'm suggesting, then he doesn't get to go to Masters, even though he might be the best Warhammer player all around.
Yes. I would say under most of the current setup, it would actually, if he's really inclined that he wants to go to Masters, I think it would actually incentivize him to have his army commission painted, right? Because at most tournaments, he's suffering at worst a small cap reduction in points for having his army commission painted, right? And he knows that if he goes out and has it commission painted, he's probably going to get a better result than he would get, right? If he did it. And certainly for him, there's also, he's got a new job and there's the question of time and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So where's the incentive for him to paint it for himself? He knows when he gets to Masters or whatever, that what's going to decide his place in that tournament is solely battle, right? He's there to fight. That is the current Masters game. With some minor probably sportsmanship thing, like you can't get like just a pass fail, you can't get like a bad vote or something like that, like a bad game vote, without having a stern talking to.
Well, so I guess that's what I would challenge these guys that are worried about qualifying for Masters. I think the lead comes from the top, and by no means am I involved in this in any way. So it's probably easy for me to say because I have nothing at all invested. But define what your master is first, and make the qualification to get you to that Masters event roughly the same sort of qualification.
Right. I think that makes perfect sense.
Don't play a whole season of lacrosse and then tell everybody to strap on skates because it's now hockey that you're playing for.
Yes. Welcome to the World Series. We will be deciding the winner of the World Series by playing cricket.
Yeah.
Oh, crap. I mean, they're similar, right? They're both using bats and balls and stuff, and there are people who field the pitcher, but it's a much different game.
Yeah, indeed.
Oh, I see Skaven and AZ put up his soft scores thing, too.
Oh, did he? Well, I'm sure he'll have lots to say about that. Because he's in that same camp, isn't he? He's the guy that gets others to paint his stuff for the most part.
Oh yes, he's pure commission as far as I know.
Yeah.
And he's introduced us to his like commission painter before, and like through his not personally, I'm just saying like through one of his videos. And I mean that guy. Let me just say he's the guy he has painting his armies is just one of the greater painters out there in the world today. He's absolutely amazing. Like all credit to that guy. He's won quite a number of Golden Demons, which is not the end all be all standard, of course, for painting, but it ain't bad. Yeah.
You know what? I feel like I should say I've been harsh on the painting for a little bit here, but I do want to say for you guys out there that do buy painted models, or have other people paint them for you, whether you're paying for them or not is irrelevant. But if you show up and play with painted models, I still want to thank you for doing that, because I would much prefer that 1,000 times, and it'll probably help out your sportsmanship vote for me if I know that you made the effort to get there with painted models, because it helps out the experience of the exhibition of Warhammer. So if you're really not interested in painting at all, or if you're not you don't find it worth investing of your time, then by all means go and do that. Please do that, because it makes the experience for both you and your opponents so much better. So I do want to say,
I could not agree with that more, because to me, like, I love seeing a painted army on the other side of the table. It's just a funny difference when it's when you're staring at gray soldiers or something like that versus having a painted army. It really is a more positive experience for me as the player. I love looking at other people's painted armies. It's one of the things I love about the game, right? And so if the choice was to have your army commission painted or paint it yourself, or sorry, have a commission painter do it, or have it be just gray primer, the first one every time, 1,000 times.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And I don't hold that against, and like, despite all this with like tournaments and scoring, this is just about how we set up these tournaments and stuff, like, to be very clear about all this and really put a hard pin on this. I don't personally have, as I said, I have done commission painting for people, so I better not have much of an issue with it, right? Because the reality is that life is a thing, you know, like, it's not everybody has the time or the luxury to do the level of painting that is required for a full Warhammer army. That's just the simple truth. Even over many years, the size of these armies, it's like, yeah, you could be in a situation where, you know, if you've got a family and a job that requires a lot of time, as many people do, you can't sit there and paint for even 2 or 3 hours a day. It can be very challenging.
Yep, agreed. So I don't want anybody to walk away from this thinking that Kieran's all against people painting models for other people or going out and buying models that have been painted by somebody else. But what Kieran is against is you taking credit for it and taking an award, especially taking an award associated with somebody else's work and effort. That's what Kieran's against.
Which I think seems more than fair. Because for those people who do, why should those people who do, like, if the guy who's painting your minis wants to show up, I'll fight, like, and I lose to him in the best painted because he or she is an amazing painter. Totally fair, right? Like, if they show up to the tournament and I lose against them because they're a better painter than me, then that's how that goes. That's what that is. But if they're not here, I think that's where it directly goes to what you were saying. Like, I'm not playing against other players that aren't here. Why do I have to paint against other painters that aren't here for things like that, category?
Yeah, that's a good way to sum that up. And I'll drive that home with one personal experience, actually. Well, there's a few experiences about people taking credit for other people's work, but one in particular. I was a judge at Golden Demon in Canada, in Toronto, a number of years ago. This is probably 2003 or 2004, something like that. So what happened here was we awarded a silver to a Lord of the Rings figure to this particular guy who put it in as his entry. And it kind of came out in social media a little bit afterwards that in fact wasn't his entry. So although it wasn't my task to do, it was the head paint judge that followed up on this, is he got in contact with the winner and said, this is the accusation that's been laid forth. And can I ask you straight up, did you actually paint this model or was it done by somebody else? And at first he said, yeah, I did that model. Sure did. And then we noticed that there was another entry in the very same competition painted by another guy that won a Golden Demon that really on closer examination was exactly the same paint style. And so we asked that guy, we reached out to him and we asked that particular guy. He said, so great job on getting the gold for that entry, but this other entry that won silver in the Lord of the Rings category, did you paint that too? Because it looks really a lot like yours. And he said, yeah, I did. That is mine. And I lent it to that guy as an entry because he wanted to participate. And we're like, oh, well then. So then we went back to the original guy and we stripped him of his award. And
yeah, that's because that's fraud. That's just straight fraud. No two ways about that.
So carrying that over to our tournament talk again, you can see the parallels are, if you're going to take credit and take home an award and compete for an award for something that you didn't do, well, there's nothing good about that. Nothing right about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of crazy to me, actually, that they even, like, Wow. It's just nutty. Like, that should be held to a high standard. I good for you, man. Like, for doing that. That's ridiculous. Like, people work and practice for years to get up to that level of skill in painting, you know? They put hours and hours in. It shouldn't be, that's just straight up cheating. Like, no two ways about it.
Yeah. So then why is it an argument when we talk about winning, about scoring points for painting in an overall thing?
Absolutely. I like it.
You know, and again, the only thing that, just to wrap that up one more time, I think the only reason it is a thing is because people who are gunning for that Masters are measured on an overall and then competing for something that's not an overall.
Right. I also think that with this, a lot of the devil is in the details. Like, I bet amongst the community we could get like broad agreement on a couple points, but so like if I were to say, you know, if we were to advance some of these points, you can't get best painted if somebody else painted your army and all these kind of things. I think a lot of people would generally be in agreement on a lot of these points, but the devil's in the details. Like, okay, well, painting is this, and you can still win best overall, but you have to accept a 0 or whatever if somebody else painted your army for your painting part, and you have to play through that handicap. Oh, and also painting is 33% of your total, you know, overall score weight, right? Like, it's literally a third. Battle's a third, painting's a third, sportsmanship's a third. Then I think people would openly rebel. If I said you take a 0, but painting is 5%, people would be like, all right, that's fine. You know what I mean? So, like, how willing they are to go along with that is probably somewhat in the devil's in the details of how it's implemented.
Yeah, on that point, I think we just leave up to the tournament organizer at every individual tournament to decide for themselves how much weight that they put onto each varying aspect of the hobby, of those 3 pillars. I mean, it's one thing you could absolutely have a tournament where the standard is that every army must be painted, but it counts for 0 towards your best overall. All the requirement is that you show up with a painted army, so that we exhibit the hobby properly, but it actually doesn't have any measure at all towards your overall score.
Yep.
And isn't that kind of what the Masters is? Maybe.
I think yes. I honestly was like, that was not me pausing for lack of ascension. I didn't want to just say absolutely. I wanted to give you an honest response without saying So yes, there you go.
Yeah, well be. So there you go. So I think there's still opportunity for people to participate in all these things, because even at the best of times, I don't think that I have ever been to or organized an event where painting has been more than a third, but yet battle always seems to be more than a third. So it's already in your favor, guys, for those that don't want to paint and just want to play the game and exhibit your strategic mind. It's already in your favor the predominant amount of the time. All right. I feel we've talked about that enough. What else do you want to talk about?
Let's talk about round bases, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw some snippets and pictures of that the other day.
Yes. I dug through one of the painting blogs or one of the not painting blogs, but one of the podcast blogs. I'm trying to think of whose it was. Crap. Name eludes me, but whatever. They had just an ungodly number of photos.
So now that they've come from, it's confirmed that those pictures were taken in the exhibition hall of Warhammer World.
Yes.
There's kind of no denying it. There's no denying it. There's no conjecture that it's some greasy bastard photoshopping things to cast fear into into the hobbyist hearts.
Right.
It's a thing.
It happened. Things ended up on round bases. Yes, that is a true thing that did occur.
So
I mean,
how
people
about
could still hold out some amount of hope if they want. that that they were just basically telling, or that they, like, I think Lord T posted. Let me see what he actually responded. Oh, I won't misquote him here. He said, I saw these pics and read the associated blog it was released with. According to the GW staff that were there, the heavy metal guys were allowed to use, quote, whatever bases they wanted when painting the models. And they were painted for display only, not for play.
Oh, I don't know about that. That's sort of a that's sort of one of those last ditch denial hopes, I think.
Well, here's what I'll say. I honestly will believe, like, this is not a denial of round bases existing in ninth. Okay. It could very well be that both things are true. Like, round bases exist in ninth, and the GW heavy metal team was told use whatever the heck you want, because that does seem like a thing to do. They want, for these display cases, they want it displayed however the painter thinks is appropriate. And if you go through and look at like the units, there is no logic to who's on what base, right? There are monsters on round bases. There are monsters on square bases. There are monsters cav on round bases. There are monsters cav on square bases. There are cav on round bases. There are cav on square bases, right? I mean, it's just like everything. Skirmishers, infantry, rounds and squares and mixed. It's just, it's so if it is emblematic of something to come, then to me, the only legitimate explanation is that it does not matter even in the slightest from a rules perspective, right? Like, you are literally allowed to base your models however you want, and the rules are not impacted by being on a round or a square base.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They are taking basing out of the equation.
Which then would take out the fundamentals of ranking up with ranks and files. It would take that out of the equation for how we play Warhammer and push your units around.
Well, not necessarily. No, I don't think that's the case. Like, they could still have base size requirements, which is what all the ranks require, right? Because I can be in ranks in the like Lord of the Rings uses the rounds plugging into the little round pegs, the whole square, whole thing, whatever. I don't know. Where they kind of fit in there.
They're still on a move tray and have to maintain that cohesion. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, you can still have ranks of dudes on any kind of base. I think what it does by necessity destroy, the only thing I can think of that it absolutely destroys is the arc of sight as it is currently implemented. And that's an important thing to say. Like, off of a round base, you cannot do the 90-degree angle X, which is what we have right now, right? That's just not going to, that's not a thing anymore. You could still do the 180 arc through the middle, because that's just one line. And and there are games that do that, where you have kind of a front and a back, right?
Yeah, but that only works if your models are operating as individuals still. Because if you got one model that's twisted a little bit off of angle one way, and a model three steps across the other side is angled a little bit differently than the other way, then when the unit charges, which model are you working from?
Sure. No, and that's like, I'm saying for individual models, yes. Because ranked infantry reforces itself into a square that would regenerate those arcs of sight, right? Mm-hmm. You see, like, I'm saying for an individual model on a round base. So a character wandering around its own, or a monster wandering around its own, or something, right? It could still possess the 180 thing, because you only have that model to care about in its base. It has some front, it has some back, draw a line through the middle, that's where it's facing, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
At the same time, Warhammer has had 360-degree arc of sight for individual models for more of its history than it hasn't. Right? I mean, that was a thing for a long time. I don't remember when it fell out, but it was at least up until 5th edition that was a thing.
I'm going to share with you something here. This came from a Facebook group that I'm part of, X Games Workshop Employees, it's called.
Very nice. Nice.
Yeah, there's a whole Facebook group. So, now, this was from, I don't know if I can find here which one it was from, but it was from some Games Workshop hosted exhibition, and maybe it was at Warhammer World. Anyway, I'll give you a game display that they've done, and share this with you on the screen. Okay, should be coming to you now.
Yes, I saw this. Yes, this is from Warhammer World.
Yeah,
this is their. This is like from Kane or something. I believe this is the final battle on the Isle of the Dead, because it's got Malekith on one side against against Tyrion on the other.
Yeah. So what you can tell here is they do have like units packed in together. So if you look at this whole run of Dark Elves along the bottom, so they're packed pretty tight, but there's no squared up ranks like we're used to seeing.
Sure.
Okay. And that's fine. Then here's a bigger pan out. So again, down here below, you obviously have them packed in together, but it doesn't matter that they're exactly side by side and with the bases butted up to one another.
Yep.
So if that's the future of Warhammer, that we do away with all the movement trays and all those guys that make steel movement trays go out of business, then I guess that's sad for them. But
well, this is the nightmare situation for me, honestly.
It's chaotic, doesn't it?
Yes, I think this is purely for show, because honestly, this just makes it look so much cooler, right? I don't read anything into these, because if you look at it, they have a bunch of these dioramas in both fantasy and 40K, and I think they're just exactly what they are. They're them wanting to do a big, sweet diorama of a bunch of to replicate the really cool battles from their. Here, let's pin on you because I'm running my mouth. So there you go. Now you make sure your screen's locked. There we go. So, I think this is just them wanting to replicate these awesome moments from the books, right? And I don't take it as anything more than I do. Like in some of these dioramas, there's models getting thrown around and other models picking them up, and models hanging off of bridges and things like that, right? I don't expect there to be room for models hanging off of bridges in the next edition, or bridge fights or stuff like that. I just think that they're trying to make an awesome moment out of the story come to life with the figs, and I think that's the way they do it.
Yeah, but it's a little bit mildly different than the other angle of things. There was another picture, and I might find it later, of some Nurgle guys and trolls issuing forth from Mountainhead across a bridge. Yep. And the difference with that display is that they didn't even have the models on their bases, whether they're round or square or otherwise. They just glued them onto the
display board,
onto the display itself.
Yep.
So they've gone to that level of display for the sake of their museum, I guess.
I think the difference is, if you look at that one, the one you just looked at, it's in the middle of stuff on a table that looks like a display that could change. Okay. If you look at the other ones where they're glued to the thing itself, that's in some segmented area that is meant to be that thing, which looks like more of a permanent installation, right? Because just like an art museum, I'm positive that Warhammer World has the concept of permanent displays versus rotating installations, right? Like,
yeah.
There's some things that are like, did you see the Space Marine one with the mountain with the like speeders cruising around the edge of the mountain, and like chaos coming down one side and the Space Marines charging up the other, and the Primarch guy at the top, Sigmarism or whatever his name is.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
No, I did not. But
okay, it's like there's a staircase built around the thing. Okay, like it's massive. It's got to be 12, 16 feet tall. That mountain that these jet speeders or whatever they are cruising around. So like that's a permanent installation, right? Like I'm not saying it will never change. It will the next time they rebuild Warhammer World, right? Like 10, 15 years from now when they redo Warhammer World, they'll yank that all out and do something new. But that thing will be there forever until that point. It is as permanent as things get. That one you showed, there were people milling about it. It was on like a table that looks like it's in the middle of space. So to my mind, they did that because they want to be able to pull all of those things off at some point in time and make that a new battle that's in a new book that they're doing, right? Where that's going to be the table that shows, like, when they publish Battle for the Rock Mountain Pass, that's going to be Stone Rock Mountain Pass. That's going to be what goes there instead. You know?
That's my favorite one. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah. Insert generic fantasy battle name here, whatever. You know.
Yeah. Well, I think that I guess looking at these pictures and thinking about the implications of the round base as it is, I was getting comfortable with the idea of embracing round bases for the sake of specialists and unit attachments. And I can't recall if it was you that I talked about this with a couple months ago and trying to draw the comparisons to how the War Master game worked. Does this sound familiar? Did we talk about that?
I don't think so.
Let me run it out to you in brief then. So,
Okay.
So the idea of War Master is that you bought things in units, right?
Okay.
And your unit in your army list entry said unit of skeletons equals 3 bases of skeletons. Okay, for War Master, and we're talking about super small 10 mil scale here.
Yes.
So you buy that unit and you put it on the field.
We did talk about this some, but keep going. This is good to talk about it. Go ahead.
And monsters and war machines and characters were not done on rectangular bases. They were done on round ones.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because you just put them beside whatever unit they were part of. They didn't have to rank up. They didn't have to be concerned about bases touching and those kinds of things, because all that they did in effect for that unit was they gave that unit a positive buff. Right? So having a hero with your unit meant that you got 2 extra attack dice when it came time to roll attacks. That's it.
Yep.
And maybe offer a leadership buff for the leadership tests that you needed to take. That's what it did. And similarly for monsters operated on their own. They could never join units, so they never put them onto squares. And all it meant that you had to do was you had to touch it, and then all of your different individually based parts and segments of your unit could fight that monster. So it didn't need to be on a regimented rectangle. And this is sort of what I was hoping with, is the way that they would go as a palatable thing with Warhammer. If they wanted to just mount certain unit types, heroes and unit types on rounds, because they were going to be augmenters or buffers to units, or it didn't matter what their base contact was. And in a way, they kind of already do this for war machines. War machines don't have a fixed base size. You just need to come into contact with it, and X number of guys get to fight that war machine. Simple as that. Right?
Yep. Although at the same time, that then it's funny that it should make it easier, and then it also allows hankiness because it's a war machine and has no actual base. You can hit it and then swing at any angle you want. So when you overrun, you can go shooting off in any direction toward the rest of their war machines. And yes, it's just funny how a little thing to make it easier. And that's my point. People of the world who believe that, like, knowledge of very arcane and esoteric rule sets equal power, which I think they might, in all honesty, an equal or perhaps equal some measure of skill, or whatever you want to say about it. Don't worry. Worry not. No matter what, that was something implemented to make things easier. And yet, right? And yet it opened up a new venue of showing your knowledge and skill, right? By knowing that you can do that and setting yourself up at the right angle and stuff like that, right? So no matter what the rules change to, there will always be new ways to interestingly, display your knowledge and make the game tactical and stuff like that.
It's okay. You can use the word abuse it. You can use that word.
And kind of abuse it. Yes. This space is too small for this, and I'm done.
Well, so again, it's one of those I wonder how it's going to work out kind of situations. It still remains a mystery, and we carry on with our conjecture about, is it going to happen this month, or is it going to happen in July, or when, where, and how it's all going to come together. All we know is it'll come together at some point.
At some point, I mean, geez, like, in all honesty, let's go. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, I still maintain the only thing that's odd about this is, you know, the conjecture about the next edition has been around for a year and a half already, but I think it's really been heightened by the way that the end times has run its course, and that's why it's a little bit more of a touchy thing for a lot of folks now than it ever was before in past edition changes.
That's probably true, yes, because as I've said on like a previous paintisode, I didn't guess that a bunch of people were really interested in the fluff. I would not have thought that. Like, that is to say that there were a lot of really hardcore fluff warriors out there.
Mm-hmm.
Until the end times happened, and then apparently everybody now really all of a sudden cares about the fluff, and they are just stricken with grief that the end times blew up the world. It is a major insult to them beyond all insults. I would not have believed it.
Yeah, that is a bit surprising, really. Let me think it through. Oh well.
But hey, I guess people really cared. So that's neat. I mean, that's cool. I got no problem with that. I think that maybe people, I think in general, people probably need to, I mean, I don't want to say relax a little bit, but maybe relax a little bit on this stuff, because like, stories end. That's what makes a good story. Good stories end. Like,
yeah.
You know, I read Catcher in the Rye. It's a great novel. It has an end, and not necessarily the happiest of endings, right? But that doesn't diminish Catcher in the Rye. It's because of that ending that it's quality. Good stories end. Hopefully they end well. And I guess that would be, you know, that's the judgment. If people don't feel that the end times was a good story, well, that's fair. I mean, you know, that's okay. That's cool. Certainly allowed to hold that opinion. I happen to be a person who does think it ended pretty well. I think that there was no way they could, and also a person who is done, you know, who is a game designer and who's done all these things and who has a great amount of sympathy for people trying to end major stories like this, which is just an unbelievably not fun thing to do, right? Because you're never going to make everybody happy. That's really what it boils down to.
Clearly.
And in the Warhammer world, there are so many mouths to feed, you know.
Yeah, that's the way to put it. Well, it's been around for a long, long time. I mean, we can't be hard pressed to think of a story arc that has gone on for 40 odd years. Well, that's maybe an exaggeration. 30 odd years. Let's give it that.
Yeah, probably ish, or close-ish to, right? I mean, I would say I don't think the fluff really developed in any strong way until I would place it at, like, once they started making individual army books is when, so like sometime around 4th edition. So this is 92 when the fluff actually started taking off. I'm not saying there wasn't fluff before that. Certainly there was, and there was a world and stuff. But I think it was post 92 when the world we recognize really came into existence, because that's when it had to come into existence, right? Suddenly, when they went from like just the armies book, right, or having information in the base rule book only or whatever, to having a bunch of individual army books, that meant that all of a sudden there's a bunch of like, we got to write a lot of pages now. You know what I mean? Like we got some hungry baby birds to feed now because we got all these pages and all these army books we got to fill. So it's time to make some crap up, you know?
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, you're right. That probably was 4th edition that really began to become relevant, I guess. All right. So then we'll cut it to 20 years. Anyway,
Still good.
pretty healthy.
Yeah,
pretty
it's
healthy.
a nice little run.
I mean, the one comparison that I'm not terribly knowledgeable about, but I know that they happened, was the comic book realms, right? Like both Marvel and DC effectively hit the reset button on their universes, and for one of them more than once.
Yes. I made a video about this called Edition Changes.
Right.
So if anybody wants to see my thoughts on this exact subject, I have a couple of videos out there about it. I think I actually have a couple where I address this. But yes, this is not an uncommon thing in the world of other stuff, right? Like other so this is my I think I covered this in my A Tale of Two Changes video, if I remember right. Anyway, yes, comics have not only done that, they've done that multiple times where they punch the reset button.
Yep.
Because the tale of history, the weight of continuity, the amount of stuff and mouths they have to feed grows too large. And it becomes a detriment to current storytelling because everything just creates plot holes and they have to constantly be like watching and figuring out where they're screwing up and stuff like that. And it just gets to the point where you're like, ugh, forget it. You know, I don't even just whatever. They you need to clean slate it. And that's where things like those elsewhere, like where Elseworld stories were always really fun and strong because you didn't have to worry about that. It was so I just can't imagine the liberation that the writers of like Elseworlds and What Ifs and the Marvel series from the 2000s on crap. Why is this name not in my head? The Ultimate line, right? Ultimate Spider-Man and all that, where they didn't have to heed all that. They just got to do whatever they want. And as long as the heart and the core of the characters and the tone of the world is right, I don't care about any of that. You know, like none of that's relevant. Why is continuity relevant? There's no value in continuity by itself. None. Stories aren't about continuity on their own, right? The value comes in characters and interactions and stuff like that. And as long as the core themes of those, a story has to have continuity in itself, but only insofar as those characters are concerned.
Sure.
And the actions that they take. So I think once you get beyond that, who cares? Whatever.
Well, and the thing that upsets people is that they believe, you know, the Lizardmen won't exist anymore, for example. But they probably will. And again, to draw parallels to the comic book world, I mean, they've hit those reset buttons and Superman and Batman have died and they've become a different incarnation, but they're still Superman and Batman.
Yes, the core of the character is still there.
In the new world that has come and out of the ashes in a way.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Absolutely. And that is what's important. I stand behind that just 100%. What's important is that the core of that character survives. Batman is, as Batman himself will attest, so in like DC 1 million, which was set 1 million years in the, or 1 million issues in the future, so like the year 58,000 or something, there's still a Batman, okay? And he's a totally different type of guy, and he's the warden of Jupiter or something, which is like a prison planet at that point, or it's not a planet anymore, so a prison thing. But he's like, you know, his statement is like, look, Batman is an ideal. It's a thing. It is more than any one man. Yeah, that's exactly the whole point, right? Yes, that's what it is. Those characters are good And if we see these things we recognize in the story, it's because they represent some greater ideal, right? Or concept or theme that appeals to our inner struggles as human beings. And as long as that's preserved, I don't have any problem with Batman the Animated Series, one of the probably the greatest superhero show ever on television. Not heeding the continuity of the comic books. Who gives a hoot? By not heeding continuity, they created Harley Quinn, right? Who is obviously an amazing character, who moved back into the mainline universe because she was so amazing and hilarious and fun. So, if they had been worried about continuity, Harley Quinn would never exist. Because that would have hit the desk and they would have been like, oh, sorry, she's not in continuity, we can't use her.
Well, and that poses some challenges all around. Because if they really do hit the reset button and start all over with these things, they could define all of these factions in very different ways. Not that that's terrible, but it's going to give the internet warrior another reason to be butthurt about it because my character died or my character doesn't exist anymore.
Oh yes,
or Malekith is different, and Gorbad is suddenly a good guy, and how do I get my head around that? That's all minor stuff, though, when it all comes down to it. In the Warhammer world already, characters have died in the story, but still exist in the army books. Like Gorbad is one of those guys, for example.
Isn't Vlad in the most recent Vampire Counts book?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a corpse up until Nagash, right? Like he didn't. I'm correct there, right? Like, didn't Nagash resurrect him, or did he come back shortly before that?
No, you're right about that. Yeah. Essentially, Manfred didn't kill him directly, I don't think, in the story, but engineered his demise because Manfred had designs on being the master of Sylvania, so that could only happen without Vlad.
Yeah. Isabella they're both in there. They are both dead. Yeah. Who cares? Yeah. I've said many times, Sigmar was a special character in the 4th edition Empire book. You could play Sigmar. I don't think he was still alive at the time that book's allegedly set.
No, sure isn't.
So whatever.
Yeah, so those things are already there, right? So you can bring up the past and you can play it out. It's in your army book. Now, I guess where people get a little bit further worried about that is, well, what if it's not in my army book anymore? Like then I clearly can't do it. And
I mean, some special characters will come and go. I think that's
if you're going to lock in on tournament play, yeah, you're probably right. You probably can't play with Magnus the Pious, for example, who was in a previous Empire book, but not in the current one.
I miss that guy.
So you probably can't do that guy. But I'm sure you and your regular gaming crowd can figure something out.
Yeah, I decided after our last conversation. I need to go, by the way. I need to call this a day for me. But I wanted to say one more thing. I decided after our last conversation about Tamerkin and playing those things that are in there, that you're exactly right. Why was I just not doing them? So I'm going to I have a big dragon I've been trying to figure out what to do something with. And I'm going to put I got one of the extra vampire ladies off the Mortis engine / whatever coming throne. And I'm going to put her on there and make her El Spira or whatever on her Carmine dragon.
Yeah, there you go.
And also, that breath weapon is not as bad as Paul was remembering. It's only like a D3 wounds. And it's a thin line. It's a cannibal shot. It's not a full breath weapon. There's some randomness to it, too. Like, I read her, and she's overcosted as all get out. But who cares? She's beautiful.
If you're an ogre and you're used to standing up against stuff for a little while, I guess it probably hurts his feelings a little bit more.
Sure. I'm just saying, like, she's 580 points and a basically unprotected lord. So,
Yeah. Suck it up, Paul, is the message.
That's right. Paul, who didn't show up for this paintisode after he asked me about it earlier today. That's what you get. All right, I do need to get going. I have early work tomorrow morning, and it is 1 a.m. where I am.
Okay. Well, thanks for hanging out tonight. Thanks for the good chats.
Oh, it's great. I got all my stuff cleaned up here and little sub-assemblies made. was very, very fruitful, very productive.
All right. And thanks for the painting tips. I'm going to go get deeper into it here on this chrome action.
I can't wait to see what you do, man. I think on small
Right.
surfaces, it's honestly a lot easier because you can make the blue and the gray blend a little easier when it's on a small surface. You can do the white edge highlighting and it looks much cleaner. You know, so I think I'm excited.
Yeah, I think that's why I wanted to start on this one, and then we'll move on to the other one where it's more metal surface a bit later.
There you go.
But anyway, okay, thanks again.
It has been an
Good night.
honor and a pleasure, as always, sir.
Okay, cheers.
Have a good one.